Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Where active government is called for, this government will act. It is time that the Treasury moved on from just counting the costs of investment to recognising the benefits too. The era of trickle-down, trickle-out economics is over. We will publish our plans for a new industrial strategy for Britain.
Hello, you're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics, live from the Labour Party conference in Liverpool. I'm Lizzy Burden.
And I'm James Woolcock.
Someone texted me during it saying it sounded more like a prime minister than a chancellor, an election campaign almost. There was a lot of focus on the Tories there.
I mean, if you had your Labour Party bingo card next to you, I think you'd have done pretty well. And by that, the reason I think it sounds like a prime ministerial speech is because it's hard to point to a part of the economy or Labour's manifesto it didn't touch upon. You have this idea of build it back Britain came back throughout that speech. This idea that we need to have active government, and that's a new phrase. This idea the state needs to bring back growth, needs to fix pensions. The idea that this is the first historic victory. Also, though, on the Labour bingo card, whether they like it or not, the idea of protest.
Yeah.
Did you catch that?
Yeah, I did want to just explain to listeners what went on at that moment. So there was a protester, a man saying that the UK and Labour are still selling arms to Israel. There was a standing ovation for the Guards, but you heard Rachel Reeves saying this is a changed Labour Party that represents the working people, not a party of protest. Despite the shouts of Free Palestine, she did manage to regain control of the room there.
I think what's fascinating is we knew that going into this, Labour Party MPs, people behind the scenes, even people on Bloomberg this morning, have been saying the Chancellor needed to make a case for optimism. Now, she definitely did that. This idea that I am ready for it, she said. The British people put their trust in us. This is our moment. Britain's best days lie ahead. Britain's best days lie ahead is used by a lot of politicians. It's a big sort of cliche for optimism. But there were no regrets or U-turns here. And you can also point to Labour will not duck the hard choices. The defence of winter fuel payments is tough choices. The defence of public sector pay rises. This was not a Chancellor who is changing course. This is just a Chancellor who in this speech is trying to draw a longer line in the future to beyond her budgets to the next election.
Exactly. And I think that is the point here. What is the time frame? How long are they going to spend fixing the foundations? And then when do we actually move on to the ambition phase of this plan? Are we going to have to wait for Labour's second term in government? You had her, as you say, doubling down on the fiscal responsibility angle. She cited the debt to GDP ratio being over 100% for the first time since 1961. She said if the black hole isn't tackled now, it'll be a problem for years to come. Not backing down on the decision on winter fuel, even though she acknowledged that it wouldn't be popular with everybody. But look, we've had economists who are actually advising Rachel Reeves saying that it's going to take tens of billions of pounds to crowd in private investment, and that money isn't being put up yet. Maybe we'll get that detail at the budget, but it's the point I made earlier. We aren't getting that detail that investors want. They've got to wait all the way till October the 30th. They might have packed their bags by then if there are going to be tax hikes on the horizon. And yet again, she said, it's the working people of Britain who are going to be saved from the tax rises. It still looks like the wealth creators are going to suffer.
But look, at the end of the day, this wasn't a budget speech. This isn't where you go for the policy. You're at Labour Party conference here in Liverpool. If you wanted policy, I think the biggest policy announcement there were two, was the industrial strategy that's coming.
The date.
Exactly.
Not the strategy.
And, well, exactly, the date and the fact that we don't Jonathan Reynolds, the business strategy. And the other sort of very niche point, this is proper wonk like me, there was a reference to it's time the Treasury moved on from counting the cost of investments in our economy to recognising the benefits too. Now, to me, a nerd, that is a coded reference to the Green Book, which is how the Treasury code and look at investment. For a long time, that's weighed investment into London, because the idea being a pound into London gives you more money back. And the idea that we need to look at where investment's going outside of London seemed like that was a big policy thing. But for me, you listen to that speech, It's more about the justification. Why is she having this iron discipline? We cannot give the Tories that chance, that opportunity. Why is she making tough choices? She says, I'm going to do things people in this conference room disagree with. That's a direct reference to the Unite winter fuel payments. She says that she's been elected to make Britain a better place and she will not duck the hard choices. That is the message she's trying to get across. She's not saying it's going to be easy. She's trying to plate her chancellorship behind a legacy and saying this is beyond just one budget. This is about a Labour mission to make your life in Britain better. Will it convince people? Will it convince the public? Will it convince delegates in this room? I think that's the question.
So you frame it as looking forwards. I heard a lot of looking backwards there, and the spectre of Liz Truss really was in the room in Liverpool as she was speaking. You know, she was talking about the road ahead being steeper and harder than they expected because of the Tory legacy. I feel like they've really been burned by the Liz Truss experience, and Rachel Reeves is petrified of the bond vigilantes, perhaps too worried about the bond vigilantes. There are lots of economists, 8 leading economists, who wrote a letter about this just last week, saying you can actually change the fiscal rules so that you could borrow more to invest, so that you can grow the economy. And as long as you stick to the rules, there is room to change them. There has to be some sort of leeway here, they would argue, and that's why I put it to Darren Jones earlier, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. He said that the Chancellor will set out details of her fiscal rules at the budget, which did suggest perhaps there's a bit of wiggle room here for change. I think that could be really interesting, and it's perhaps linking up to that nerdy point you're making, that there is going to be something different, allowing them to do more on the growth prospect.
I think it was fascinating to think about what came up in that. Building, we've already mentioned. The other word, which you've just touched on, invest. Invest, invest, invest. Now, where is that investment going to come from? I think it was fascinating that a key part of the sales pitch to Labour delegates here is there's going to be a global investment conference. Business is going to come back. There's going to be money coming back in.
Yeah, but Sky News is reporting that I think it's 150 out of the 300 who've been invited haven't yet confirmed their attendance.
And I was talking to a senior business figure just this morning who said he had told Labour it is very strange and backwards to have the investment conference before the budget. How can you get big business from around the world to invest when they don't know if they're going to get hit with a big tax rise 2 weeks later? So, despite all that, Labour want to say that they are crowding in investment, and if need be, they will take that word again, active government. Now, there's going to be a lot of questioning to see what active government means, especially in relation to pensions, in relation to their National Wealth Fund, but certainly Labour have decided that they think the answer to driving Britain's growth, productivity, involves the state taking a more active role.
Yeah, I thought that was definitely the line that will get Tories worried. Active government. What does that mean when it comes to the industrial strategy? Which sectors are they going to be backing in particular? I'm looking forward to having a fireside chat with Johnny Reynolds tomorrow, the business secretary. We're going to sit down for about an hour at a Labour Together event. So it's all about the industrial strategy. Hopefully we can get into that. I would just point out that there seems to have been a bit of a rift between him and Rachel Reeves on the work from home policy. Him saying that if people are given the flexibility to work from home, it gives them motivation and resilience, whereas she's said, I lead by example. I get my workers to come into the Treasury because that's what I want them to do. And then I put that to Darren Jones this morning, and he says, well, she's my boss, so I turn up as well. But there is this split, it seems, between the Chancellor and the Business Secretary, also potentially between Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, on what's going to happen on this workers' rights bill. The details, between the Business Secretary and Angela Rayner on what's going to happen on workers' rights. The details seem to be coming out at a different pace between them. So interesting to press on those rifts and see where they really fall.
I think a really fascinating question to ask is this speech what Rachel Reeves would have given if she'd been able to give it 3 months ago? Has it changed over that difficult summer?
Exactly.
Exactly. What is new? And I think there are bits new. I think you're right. The broad themes are the same, but there are a couple of odd lines that sort of speak to this idea that trust is fragile, that we have to deliver. There's kind of justification to the naysayers, the internal division, that we need to hold our course here. I think there is a bit of that, but you're right. Where was the reference to the riots? Where was the reference to the issues over winter fuel? Where was the reference to sleaze? I think it was noted in there, but it was hidden and it was very quiet. And I'm very curious to see how it sets the tone for Starmer tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, even just this morning I've been getting texts from economists about this, saying that this is a playbook that's been written months ago and they're not being nimble enough, they're not reacting to the reality in front of them. And actually the economic data over the summer weren't as gloomy as they were portraying. And of course they're rolling the pitch for a painful budget and talking about the doom and gloom, but actually the Bank of England didn't cut rates by 50 basis points because the governor isn't as bleak about growth prospects as his counterparts across the pond. I had an economist saying this morning, if it would be interesting to talk to Reeves about why she thinks debt is the major constraint on fiscal policy and not inflation, contrary to what we see across the markets. Japan versus Turkey, for example, and the lessons of the trust budget. They're saying the fiscal rules are just a sideshow, a modest amount of additional borrowing to finance supply-enhancing public investment would go down well with markets if explained in the correct way.
So I think where do we leave off today? Which is, this was the optimism people were asking for. Maybe not as much detail as you would have liked, Lizzy, but we now know where we are wanting to see it. The Global Investment Summit, the budget, this industrial strategy, the dates are set on the calendar, and as we are saying here at Bloomberg, there are 6 weeks, I think that's what the Lloyd's of London chairman told us this morning, for Rachel Reeves to turn around the economy and bring investors back on board. The mood music has been set. Whether people are convinced by it, the speech has been given. I think the question now, though, is what are we going to see in the detail and when it bring those key stakeholders back on board?
You're far more optimistic than me, James. I did not hear detail there for the wealth creators. Oh, I can see the business secretary, Johnny Reynolds, just walking past our booth. He's heading towards the main conference hall. But there were no answers on whether those tax hikes are coming, what they will be. Are they going to equalise the rate of capital gains tax with income tax? If you're an investor, a wealth creator who had your bag packed and by the door, that speech will have done nothing to change it. But we're going to tune into Keir Starmer as well tomorrow, his main conference speech before he heads off to UNGA in New York. It actually seems a little like the international agenda is more easy for him to deal with than the domestic one. Perhaps that's why he's sucking the energy out of this conference hall early. But we'll tune into that and we'll bring you full coverage right here on the podcast as well.
Yeah, I think when we come back to the speech in years to come, this idea of we do not have to choose between a fair society and a good economy. So that is the Britain we are building. That is the Britain I believe in. Those quotes from Rachel Reeves, first ever speech as Chancellor of the Exchequer to the Labour Party conference, first of any Labour Chancellor in 15 years. So look, Lizzy, that's it from us today here in Liverpool. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe and give it 5 stars that other people can find on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
Well, this episode was produced by Tiwa Adebayo and our audio engineer was Sean Guastamakia. Live from Liverpool, I've been Lizzy Burden at Labour Party Conference.
And I'm James Woolcock. We'll be back with more tomorrow. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg UK Politics. Listen weekdays at noon on DAB Digital Radio in London.